The rear suspension of this El Camino clearly works, but it's not working nearly as well as it should. When I put the A-body 12 volt under that car, I got it close enough to work. And it did work moderately okay, except for the parts where it was binding up. The suspension travel had some issues in the middle of it, but at least it got down the track. But I've got a pile of trick chassis parts that are actually gonna make this absolutely correct and put the instant center exactly where I want it. In a previous video, I talked about what it takes to lay out the rear suspension and make it work. Now, we're gonna put that into practice. And before we get too crazy, the folks over at Lexivon sent me over this really sharp torque wrench to use during final assembly, and I've got a plan for this one specifically, so stay tuned for that one. Also, check out the link in the description. There's a coupon code where you can get 10% off the Lexivon torque wrench. Check that out.
Thanks, Lexivon.
So after rolling around on the floor for a lot longer than I cared to admit, I plotted out the rear suspension points as where this started. Now I took all those points and put them into the baseline suspension instant center calculator, so that way I would at least have a baseline to start with. And after that comes the single hardest part of any project, that first bolt. After getting that first bolt out, it's just a matter of take everything out and replace it methodically, one control arm at a time, and hope I don't screw things up.
All right, so weirdness is beginning to strike. I got the control arm out that was in there. It measures in at, I believe, 19 inches end to end. Yes. Now, I've got 3 different ones here. This is 19 inches, this is 19 3/4 inches, and the shortest I can get these is basically 20 3/4. So that's an interesting thing because I was having a hard time getting enough pinion angle in that car, and if that control arm was too short, the pinion was going to be artificially pulled up, and I could never get enough pinion out of it. So this longer control arm may actually solve the pinion angle difficulties I had with those arms being the shortest. I tell you, it is a surprise a minute here. The control arm bushings that I have are too wide for my pocket, so I need to break out the measuring stick and trim these bushings down to the correct overall length so it can go up in the pocket correctly. So after measuring this up, I got to remove 23 thousandths per side. Basically, combined on the rod end is about 46 thousandths too big. So I'm just going to take 23 off this one, 23 off that one, and we're going to try again because I actually can't measure nicely in there inside that pocket. My calipers just are not quite long enough. So one of the hardest things to do on these things is to fish the bolt back through. So what I do is I've got one of those 3 little jaw clampy dealies threaded through everything with the bolt just lightly electrical tape to the end. I'm just gonna pull it straight through. In case you didn't believe me, there it is, right there, pulled through.
All right, with all the stuff taken out, it's now time to start putting in the new stuff. This is the bearing, this is the bearing right here. It's not on the floor, I promise. This goes into the upper ear on the differential. But how the heck does that work? Well, it's actually pretty cool. It's a bearing that's pressed into the middle of this aluminum thing, held in with a little circlip, and it just unthreads on one side. Comes apart in 2 pieces. That's like a 2 1/8 inch hex. I don't know many hobbyists that have something that big on hand. So a big pair of channel locks is going to be what I'm going to use. Put this in place, tighten it down, and that's going to be the thing that the upper control arm rides in here. There's a couple of spacers in there that take up the distance in the upper control arm, but that works out pretty cool. So I'm going to wire wheel the differential, get it cleaned up a little bit, so that way I can get this installed. Now with both of those bearings in there nice and tight, yes, I had to put some marks on them with some channel locks. Not happy with that, but they're in there tight now. So now I get the fun task of degreasing the torque box, so that way I can get the metal prepped and begin welding in the upper control arm forward mounts. So after getting everything cleaned up, I got everything set in there, cranked it down with some clamps, and burned them in. And I will openly admit that a grinder and paint make me the welder that I ain't. I do enough to get by. I don't do this professionally, and let's just say, don't look too close at those welds because I may have gone astray just a little bit. But they're burned in. There's plenty of heat there. The bolt is in, and I'm just going to wait for everything to cool before I go getting the upper control arms in place because I like the skin on my fingers, right where it's at. So after welding everything all together, I came to the conclusion that now I see why there's a lot of G-body braces that run from the outer frame skin, or the inner frame skin in this case, to that torque arm box. Because that metal is flimsy as heck. I think I'm going to work on building a brace, but that's probably a story for another day. Right now, it's time to get those upper control arms in place and start seeing how things fit together. So I found a problem. Remember how I said earlier in the video that those longer control arms are going to be fine, it's going to fix all my pinion angle problems? Yeah, that's too much. I cycled it through its range of motion, and that pinion is at U-joint breaking angles. So I reached out to Trick Chassis, and turns out I do have the wrong lower control arms. The G-body ones are actually like 19 and 3/4, 19 and a half inches long. Those are, what did I say, 21 and 3/4? So they're 2 inches too long. Turns out I got sent the B-body specific lower control arms, not the G-body. So I got to get those off, send them back, get the new parts here, and put those in. So, welcome to life. I'm going to turn the heater back on and get back to work.
Later.
Good news! The correct length lower control arms have come back from Trick Chassis. And I want to be clear, this isn't really anybody's fault. When you got a whole pile of these that are black and sit next to each other, they all kind of look the same. So, no worries, just a quick email, got everything squared back up, and the chickens are happy today because it's sunny. So I'm just going to get the new arms put together, and we'll head under the car. So because I'm in a trust but verify kind of mindset, I measured these up against the original style lower control arms, and they measure 19 and a quarter on center with the holes. So these are coming in like 18 and 5/8, so I need to loosen them up. So all I'm doing is just loosely holding that end of the vise and rotating this out. And I've got 2 of the bushings sitting here on my welding table, so that way I can make sure the spherical rod ends are flat, measure 19 and a quarter on center, everything's happy. Now with the arms the same length, let me just speed this process up. I'll check back in once I get those arms back in. So both lower control arms have been replaced, and now I'm back in here. And astute viewers are going to notice that yes, those are down a hole from when I originally installed them. We'll get to that in just a second, but trust me, it's for instant center purposes. So I'm at the point now where I need to jack up the differential and basically put the car at ride height, bunny ears, basically just put it under its own load. And then we need to set the pinion angle. Pinion angle there in relation to the transmission yoke. So the reason I used the lowest hole is to get the instant center where I wanted it. Now, as you can see on screen, I'm sure I'll put it here, this is basically where the instant center is going to be, and this is based on all my calculations. To set the pinion angle, crank the differential back up into the chassis, basically, and you're going to want to use an angle finder. Now, whether you use a digital one or the analog one, it doesn't really matter. But ideally, with solid Heim joints like this, we want the pinion angle, this being the pinion angle, down, exaggerated of course, 1 to 3 degrees, because on launch, that pinion is going to rotate upwards and put the U-joints at the correct angle. So I totally screwed up. I forgot to press record as I was squaring up the differential. Kind of an important step, right? So here's kind of how it worked. I was rolling around on the floor for what seemed like hours, and I had totally screwed up the rear end positioning. I was adjusting things, it didn't make any sense. And my helper came out, and we put a tape measure at a common point at the front of the car and measured to each side of the differential to get it squared up. And now the rear end is sitting square in the car. If you were smart, you could also take some measurements beforehand to a common point that you can easily get to and set the differential up to that point, and it would probably be quicker and easier. All right, the car is back on the ground, and I climbed under it and came to some realizations. The lower control arm is within a 1/4 degree of parallel to the ground. It is absolutely dead flat, practically. And with the upper control arm in the lowest hole, it gives me an anti-squat value of like 171%. A bit too much. So playing with the instant center calculator from Baseline Suspensions, I created a whole bunch of scenarios. And the most realistic option that I have right now is to move the upper control arm up a hole and move the rear lower control arm down a hole. That'll put the instant center somewhere like 63 inches ahead of the rear axle, within an inch or two of the center of weight, making this as solid of a hit as possible, lifting the car from practically the center of its entirety of mass and driving that rear suspension into the ground with the entire force of the entire car, not just the last 40 inches or so. All right, you can see we got the lower on this side, and the upper control arm is now in the second hole up. So between these changes, this puts the instant center like 63-ish, 64-ish inches straight ahead, right around the center of mass. Now that that's taken care of, I'm at a point where we need to torque things down, get it on the ground, and make sure that instant center hits where I want it to hit. So we're going to break out the Lexavon torque wrench, we're going to consult the sacred text of torque specs, and we're going to get these torqued down. We are looking for rear bushing nut, 73 foot-pounds, 70 foot-pounds. Everything else is 70 foot-pounds. So we're just going to go to 70 foot-pounds. So you want to loosen the thing on the bottom.
There we go.
All right. So now we're looking for 70 foot-pounds. But you'll see that every half revolution is 25 foot-pounds. So we need to go to 50 plus 20. You're at 50, so we'll go to plus 20.
Huh?
Yep, just like that. And then tighten that little set screw down. There you go. So you like that torque wrench?
Yes, I do. It's a nice torque wrench.
Well, the nice folks at Lexavon wanted me to give that to you to help you build your tool collection.
Thanks, Lexavon.
Okay, now what do we do after we're done using a torque wrench?
We reset it
To its lowest torque value. So that bar angle change took a little over an hour to do all 4 points. Makes you appreciate a real, like, 4-linked race car that you can do that a lot quicker. Anyways, I'm not complaining. It's just stating what it was. So that instant center, like I brought up, is set up to be right around the center of weight. It should make this car about as efficient as I can possibly make it, given the constraints I have in the chassis available. So anyways, guys, this was an interesting trip. And if you're looking for a new torque wrench, especially one that promotes good family values, check out the Lexavon one. There's a link in the description and a coupon code. And also, if you like this video, check this one out over here. I know you'll like that one too.